I am delighted to be here again, this time with, under the Steve Coates definition, an expert. That is somebody who's been working for more than 10 years, more than 20 hours a week in a particular discipline. So, Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background.
I know nothing about grunge or comics, for starters, though I did like a bit of Nirvana when I was younger. So I started the blog Domain Insight about 9 years ago, a little bit more than 9 years ago, and that was after about a decade as a general purpose technology reporter. I was out in San Francisco for most of that time covering Silicon Valley, mainly internet-related issues, security, and domain names. The domain names part of it was kind of a hobby. My editors never really understood why I liked going to these ICANN meetings all the time, but I kind of got addicted to them when I was basically a rookie, fresh out of college in '99. I got sent off to ICANN number 2 in Berlin when it was a kind of a very formative, chaotic organization, and it kind of struck me like this kind of Rick's Cafe or mini United Nations where everybody from around the world was kind of coming together and arguing. So I just kind of enjoyed the vibe and covered it ever since. And when I quit my job and came back to London, I decided to make it my full-time job to cover the domain name industry and ICANN, or the intersection of politics and business, as I sometimes say.
So tell us a little bit about Domain Insight, about the actual blog and what sort of things you cover.
Well, I'd be lying if I said that ICANN wasn't the main thing. I'd say at least half of what I write about is at least ICANN related. But it's kind of the bit that interests me is where a policy discussion impacts like a kind of a free speech issue or a censorship issue or privacy issue or the business of selling domain names. Sometimes there can be a working group that nobody's paying any attention to could come up with a policy that suddenly knocks $1 million off somebody's revenue. And that kind of thing is what interests me, is to kind of wade through a 300-page PDF or spend weeks listening to conference calls to pluck out little tidbits of information that I can kind of weave into this into a story that actually has kind of actionable impact for people.
And what sort of readership do you have? Who are the people who typically follow you?
I've never actually measured this, but based on the people who talk to me and come up to me and say they read me, I'd say it's kind of a broad cross-section of the domain name industry and the ICANN community. So people in the business of domain names and brand owners and civil society types, domain investors to some extent. They tend to come depending on what the story. But yeah, it's basically ICANN community, domain industry, but it's very broad. A lot of my competitors are very focused on domain investment, but that's not really my area of specialty. So I tend to focus on the kind of the policy sell side of the business.
And how often do you put something out?
Depends really. I try to do it daily. Sometimes there's either nothing interesting to write or there's something very interesting to write. It just takes me longer than a day to write it. So it's not every day, but there's at least
multiple times a week.
Oh yeah, there's like at least 10 posts a week.
Right.
But I tend to. It can be sporadic sometimes, but I tend to put up maybe 10, 12 posts a week.
Okay, that's great. So just so you understand, the objective of this session is, we've got somebody here who's an expert in the domain industry or an observer of the domain industry, let's say, and ICANN in particular. So what we want to do is to explore all the different topics that are relevant to you guys. So if you want to ask a question at any point, just put your hand up. I'll pause from time to time and give people an opportunity to ask questions, and we've got mics that we'll bring over. The opportunity to ask somebody who studies this professionally questions about what's going on in the industry. If you don't ask anything, I'll just keep asking questions. Oh, Steve's got a question already.
Kevin, what are some of your most popular articles? In terms of click-through.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about all time, then I guess the top ranked articles are porn related. Because I don't want to say the headline on stage because it includes a couple of profanities, but there was a story I wrote several years ago about a uni registry that runs .sexy, and I guess just a combination of popular search terms in the headline has just got me lots of SEO traffic over the years. But in terms of, last year I did a summary at the end of 2018 saying what my top stories of the year were, and apart from the top story was about somebody who died, but the second, a lot of them in the top 10 were about GDPR and about the death of a GTLD registry called Famous for Media, which was kind of renowned for being a bit abusive and just kind of steadily faded out of existence last year. Those are the two main ones that drove traffic last year, excluding the ones that just came in because of accidental search engine terms. The GDPR was probably the biggest, the story I probably spent the most consistent amount of time on last year. Because I think at the start of the year, ICANN hadn't really spent any time talking about it at all. Suddenly realized it had 6 months to talk about it and fix the problem. And then the second half of the year was them attempting to fix the problem. So there was a lot of coverage of that.
And what would you say? Can you summarize that for people here? Because I know, our clients were, whenever we ran a webinar with GDPR in the title, we'd get 500 people on it about a year ago, particularly a year ago, because it was coming out, what was it, May the 31st or something last year, GDPR came in?
It was 28th, I think.
28th,
it was the end of May.
Yeah, how would you summarize your commentary on GDPR?
Well, I covered it exclusively as it relates to WHOIS. So like WHOIS has been open forever. Anybody could access any WHOIS record. Suddenly, everything was redacted. Yeah. And obviously, for me, that was annoying because I use WHOIS quite a lot to figure out whether the people I'm talking to are genuine or not, and cross ownership of businesses. There's a lot of there's a lot of shell games in the domain industry. Lots of people set up these bogus LLCs. I believe MarkMonitor does this as well, to disguise who's registering domains. So sometimes you need to kind of figure out who am I really talking to here. But obviously for law enforcement, for governments, for trademark owners, it was it was annoying. I think my view, I might be wrong on this, maybe somebody can correct me, but my view is that it's not so much that individual WHOIS records were no longer available, it was that the aggregated data was no longer available. It wasn't possible to cross-reference records anymore, because that was probably the main problem. Like you can still file a UDRP now against the domain name without knowing who it is. Yes. But it's not possible to find out who else, or it's harder to find out what other domains that person owns.
What else they've got,
and I guess now, one of the big problems is that although registrars are told that they have to respond to inquiries about WHOIS data, it's not uniform, and people don't know how to, what information you need to give the registrar in order to get a satisfactory response, and each registrar is different, and it's quite difficult to zero down what these people need in different jurisdictions. Some people are like, it's a court order or nothing. Others have trusted notifier relationships, I guess. And so what ICANN's been doing is the second half of last year, they were kind of just trying to formalize what the purposes of WHOIS were under GDPR. And now, literally tomorrow, is going to be the start of the second phase of work, which is figuring out who is allowed to get access to, gated access to WHOIS data that would otherwise be redacted, and how that system should be administered, whether ICANN should do it, whether registries, it's all a bit up in the air at the moment, and it's probably going to be 2 years before we have an answer to that question.
Wow.
They're saying 12 to 18 months, but that means 2 years at least, I think, usually, in ICANN.
And who do you think they'll allow to have access to that gated data?
I think the no-brainers are law enforcement.
Yes.
And by that, in a kind of broad sense, like consumer protection agencies probably as well. And I'm not sure if it's a given that brand owners get it, or on what terms they get it, because there is quite a lot of resistance from the non-commercial sector to giving Facebook or Twitter or Google access to private data, given their behavior in terms of the use of like social media data. But the IP's got a strong voice at ICANN, so probably there'll be some there. Like there's no voice for the media at ICANN, so I'm not expecting to ever get access to data unless I can pass myself off as a security researcher or consumer protection advocate or something like that.
Right.
Security researchers probably, I think, will get in. It's hard to tell, really.
Yeah, we found that gaining access to WHOIS data since GDPR is a lot more difficult, but you have to kind of formulate your question very precisely.
Yeah.
So in other words, and we've gradually become more expert at it over, the last year, I suppose, but definitely kind of rights owners on their own have found it difficult.
Wait, what's your response rate like?
I can't remember what it is. Is anybody in the room? Prudence, can you answer that question? Yeah, get a mic to Prudence, or there might be other people. I've seen the stats, actually. I've seen Staten talk about the stats. The question is, what's the response rate from registries and registrars, I guess, when we ask the question correctly about WHOIS data?
With regards to registrars, it varies. Some are more responsive than others. Without going into naming which one are the most responsive, it will differ.
Can we not get Prudence a microphone? Sorry, we're getting you a microphone. There's two there.
With regards to registries, so with regards to registrars, it will vary from registrar to registrar with regards to our requests. So some registrars are more compliant than others and respond better than others. Some are slower but responsive. On the whole, they have been responsive. We haven't had many where we've had like no response at all. With regards to registries, I'm not sure, and I'm not kind of privy to what the kind of responses have been so far with regards to requests.
What sort of things did we have to put in the request to make them more responsive? The specific nature and the specific reason for wanting it, I presume.
Yeah, it's along those lines of
The legal
having to
basis,
kind of...
Yeah, legal basis is what
Yes.
Kevin's just said, yeah.
Yeah.
So for those of you in the audience that want to, understand how to do that.
I think that's what ICANN's trying to do right now. It's got this expedited policy development group talking at the moment, and by
EPDRP, isn't it? Or something like that.
EPDP, expedited
That's it.
policy development process, and it's basically 30 odd people from all the sectors of the ICANN community who twice a week for 2 hours argue about precisely this issue. But the thing is, these same people have been arguing about this issue for 20 years and haven't gotten anywhere.
Right.
And now people want access quickly, and I just don't think the ICANN system is set up to work that quickly. So yeah, we're probably looking at 2 years before there's any kind of resolution, I think.
A bit like Brexit then.
2 years for Brexit, really? I fully expect to die in the EU.
So any other questions on GDPR while we're on that? Otherwise we'll move on to something else. Doesn't look like
I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a GDPR expert.
No, sure, but it was been a big topic the last year, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what other things have been topical in the last couple of years, would you say, in the domain space and the ICANN world?
I mean, a lot of the things that I write about, a lot of the themes that recur through this are kind of similar. There's always this kind of tension between kind of privacy and intellectual property.
Sure.
There's also the idea of like censorship. I mean, when I first started writing Domain Insight 9 years ago, one of the big stories was .xxx, and
Right.
all the people who wanted to stop it, and it was a censorship argument. It was a pornography argument. So the domain names are always kind of like the gatekeeper of these sensitive issues. Right now there's an issue of freedom of speech on the internet, with Twitter, Facebook shutting down voices on the right, and the right thing saying, well, you're these lefty liberal San Francisco companies who are trying to censor us and shut us up, and so they go to the domain registrars as well, and they pressure GoDaddy, for example, to shut down a far-right website. They migrate to a different registrar. They end up TLD hopping in some cases. So there's kind of an overarching issue right now of using domain names to stifle free speech, like hate speech or free speech, depending on
Right.
which side of the coin you're on. So that's been quite interesting recently. There's one registrar in particular that's kind of welcoming all of the Nazis with open arms and.
Oh, really?
Well, I'm not sure I'd say Nazis, not necessarily, but far right people.
Yeah.
And it's attracted a lot of flack for that. There's probably some Nazis there, but yeah, they're getting some flack for that. But they're saying, look, it's free speech. And those kind of questions are eternal for a journalist because there's no right answer to any of them. So
No.
you can just keep writing about them forever. That's been something recently. I guess from the kind of brand protection side of things, there is a lot more kind of voluntary brand protection services that the new GTLD registries have started to offer.
Right.
Outside of ICANN, just stuff they're doing themselves. There's, I'm sure lots of people will be aware of Donut's DPML, Domain Protected Marks List. This is one of
Hands
the...
up if you know what we're talking about.
Okay, so some
About a
of
third of the
you,
audience.
but basically Donuts is a registry that has, as of this week, 242 different TLDs. They've got like .ninja, .guru, .bike, 242 of them. And just help, depending on your point of view, to help trademark owners reduce their costs of having to defensively register their domains. They said, well, pay us one reduced fee and we'll block your trademark in all 242 of them. And they've been doing that since launch. They've been doing it for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it's been very, very popular with our clients, I would say.
I mean, I don't have any data. They refuse to tell me how many they've actually sold, and it's not available in public data sources because it's not a registered domain name. It's a block. It prevents people registering the domain name. But it's like pennies on the dollar, right? It's like instead of paying $20 to register a name, you're paying $2.
Yeah, because of the volume of extensions or TLDs that Donuts manage, it was. I mean, for some of the brand owners in the room, I don't know what I'd be interested in their commentary on it, but it felt like good value to put your trademark in the trademark clearinghouse and then block across the 240. Yeah. It wasn't 240 at the time, it was 200, but now since they acquired one or two other registries, it's become that big.
Yeah.
But that's probably increased the value of it. So most of our clients did that for their core,
Well, they have put their prices up since they expanded, I think.
Have they?
I'm not sure how much, but but anyway, that's old news. That happened 6 years ago or something. But we're seeing more of the other registries now kind of following suit. Uni-registry's got about 20 TLDs. They're offering a similar service. A story I'm going to break this afternoon after I finished here is that there's going to be a new type of DPML from the .club registry. And so the difference with this one is going to be that instead of blocking one string across 200 TLDs, you're blocking one string from appearing anywhere at the second level in .club. So any suffix, any prefix, your brand in the middle, .club, you can block for $2,000 for 3 years. Which is something that I've heard, I think the trademark lobby at ICANN wanted that for free through ICANN policy, but this company, I believe, is the first one to offer it as a paid-for service, and they're announcing that in a few days, but I'm going to be writing about that this evening.
So they operate just the one extension?
Yeah, they're the opposite of Donuts. Donuts has lots of TLDs and spends almost no money marketing them. .club just throws all its money marketing this one TLD. I think I said today to .club, Donuts has got a big stable and you're a one-horse town. How does this make any sense?
They like that.
They know me.
Yeah.
So if you were Google, you could register the string Google with them for this $2,000 for 3 years, and my Google search .club would be blocked, and Kevin Google Murphy .club would be blocked, and trillions of combinations, any combination of letters where your trademark string appears in the middle or beginning or the end would be unavailable, people would go to GoDaddy, type in a string containing your trademark, and it would just come up as unavailable. So they couldn't cybersquat it. And they say the cost rationale for this is that lots of UDRP filings have been made in .club, and they cost at least a couple of grand a pop,
Yeah,
right?
at least,
So if you just register your one string, then it's blocked. You don't have to pay for UDRP ever again in .club. And I think they offer a 50% discount on typos as well.
So Goggle as well as Google.
Exactly, but the problem is it's not going to apply to everybody because lots of trademarks are dictionary words. So they can't very well start blocking. I can't think of an example right now.
Oh, Steve.
Amazon?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that was a dictionary word, but it's definitely
It's a well-known word. Yeah.
it's a geographic word, so they probably wouldn't qualify for it. Twitter probably, well, would Twitter even? I'm not even sure. Skype would qualify. I mean, the word they use is fanciful. I guess that's a term of art in IP law, right? So if it's a fanciful trademark, then you qualify for this service. But if it's something that I haven't quite got all the answers to my questions on this yet because I had to come here. But it seems to me there must be some kind of software component because one of the rules is that you can't block a string if it would prevent a dictionary word from being registered. So they must have some kind of software that passes through all of the possible dictionary words and phrases and to make sure that this string doesn't appear within them.
Yeah,
So I guess
sure.
if you've got two words as a run-on, it might block it, And I think there's probably a way to challenge it as well. I'm not sure on the full details yet, but it strikes me as something that's brand new, and it's something that, at least prior to the new GTLD round, the IP lobby at ICANN were talking about all the time. So we want to be able to block our strings.
Right.
They didn't want to pay for it, but at least, I mean, it's only this one registry that's doing it now, but others might come.
Yeah, if it's popular, they'll all want to do it, I would think.
There's probably no point paying for it if the registry is an unpopular one. It's an unpopular TLD where people don't tend to cyber squat, but .club's got a couple of million, 1.5 million maybe, domains under management, and they say that they've had a lot of UDRPs. So if you're one of the bigger brands and you've got a fanciful term, maybe it would make economic sense.
What do people think of that? Do you have a view on that, Martin?
Did I explain it well? Does anybody understand?
Do
Everybody
you all understand
understand
what so the proposition is, and it's going to be announced in a few days' time, is that in .club you could block any string including your brand, your trademark term for an amount of money. Is that good value?
I mean, it's trillions of...
The details of it are going to be in terms of cost and
Well, I mean, the cost is
$2,000
$2,000
for
for 3 years. I think they've got some kind of deal where if you buy it before the end of this year, it runs to 2023 or something like that.
so if your brand protection strategy would typically mean register a domain and then a suite of domains, it may just be easier to do that rather than rely on something like this. But there's an option here. It does sort of lead us back to the original idea that was a globally protected marks list, which was touted at the beginning of the new GTLDs.
And that's what
It's a way of monetizing it within the registry stable.
I mean, it's what I mean. The GPML was going to be the ICANN policy. It got voted down within ICANN, and then Donuts just stole the idea. And no, yeah, we'll do that, but we'll charge for it. But what I'm talking about here is trillions of combinations. It's more like a UDRP avoidance mechanism. And if you think that you're going to be paying, I don't know, 10 grand a year filing UDRPs against domains in .club, the value proposition with this one is you pay 2 grand for 3 years and you don't have to file any UDRPs at all. And maybe the trademark lawyers in the room want to keep that quiet, don't tell their clients.
Well, they're going to find out when they read your blog later today.
Oh, if only they read my blog.
So, okay, Steve's got a question. I was going to say we've only got 5 minutes left, but I've got one specific question from... No, you go, Steve, go.
Well, I'd be worried about the PR backlash that you might get going through that registration program. Like if I take Amazon's Echo mark and register Echo.
You wouldn't qualify. It's a dictionary word.
Right, but I could see how there'd be value for, say, Cartier or luxury brands to go forward with that. That seems like a good product.
I mean, any, like, who's a big UDRP file like Lego?
Yeah.
Right.
But then again, Lego, you know, you could have, might block some things because lots of words end in,
Legal, yeah.
and lots of words end in LE, and lots of words
Yeah.
begin in GO, so even Lego probably wouldn't qualify. There's probably quite a small customer base for this now I think about it. I'm not trying to sell this product, I'm just going to, I'm giving you guys the scoop on my scoop. I'm telling you guys before I actually write about it this
Yeah,
evening.
that's good. That's good.
So, sorry, just to add on to that, though, I think it usually becomes more complicated in terms of which dictionary you're using. So, which language.
That's a good point.
And terms that are spread around the globe. So, club is not restricted to a simple jurisdiction.
Well, one of the reasons .club's doing quite well is that it is a word you can see all over the world. I mean,
Yeah, in many languages.
I think
True.
Colin, the guy who runs it, went to China and just saw the word club everywhere and thought, that's the one I want, when he was deciding which TLD to apply for.
Huh.
But you wanted to move on.
Yeah, so the one question I want to ask you, because we've only got like 4 minutes left, and this is something that people ask me all the time, so I thought as a person who watches the industry, I should throw it at you. When do you think the next round of .brand is coming, and how popular do you think it'll be?
So that was quite a specific question. When's the next round of .brand?
Well, sorry, no, okay. When's the next stage of liberalisation of the the next round of new TLDs?
Well, no, but you know, it was a pertinent question because there were some people who wanted to be split up and want
Right.
.brands to be able to get in first.
Really? Okay, I didn't know
Because
that.
there are different. I'm not, to be quite honest with you, the process for reviewing the new GTLD program has been going on for so long and it's so
Yes.
complicated. I'm not sure on all the details, but there is a faction that wants, like, says, look, brands are not controversial. They don't have spam. They don't have, any abusive content. They're
closed
known
normally,
quantities.
yeah.
The vast majority of them aren't even used.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there with one domain that doesn't do anything. It's just got an abuse contact and that's it. So it's like, these are a known quantity. They're not going to hurt anybody. Let's let them in first. Because companies that didn't get into the first round, Apple, Twitter, Apple, I can't remember now, I think Apple got in, they might want to apply next time. But the overall new GTLD program, I mean, we're still a few years away. If you think about it, the first new GTLD round was actually in the year 2000, and it took about a month, and the decision-making process took 7 hours. I've got a video of it, a very grainy, real player video of this 7-hour discussion. Happened in Marina del Rey, Los Angeles, November 2000. I keep trying to put it on YouTube, but every time I do, it gets taken down for copyright infringement by Sony, I think, because the Rolling Stones are playing in the background during the coffee break. It's a 7-hour real play video.
They're using audio fingerprinting to find.
Oh yeah, but they won't see reason whenever I complain. If somebody's going to sit through 7 hours of an ICANN board of directors discussion in order to hear Sympathy for the Devil or something like that. Anyway, but yeah, the second round was in 2003. So they started up a policy development process to create the rules for a kind of an open, ongoing new GTLD process. That concluded in August 2007. But so the ICANN policy making ended June 2007, August 2007. They said, okay, we're going to do new GTLDs. Nobody was able to apply for them until January 2012. So it was 5 years from the policy being finished to the actual application window opening.
That's right.
And right now, the policy making for this next round isn't finished. It's in the final straits, but I'm not sure if they're expecting it to finish this year or next year. But after that, ICANN's got to implement it. And there was about 6 or 7 versions of the applicant guidebook last time. Each one took a round of several months to type it up, public comment, take on board the edits, public comment, and eventually they just drew a line under it and said, right, we're going to launch it now. And that was mainly because the chairman of ICANN was retiring and wanted to get it finished before he left. It wasn't even ready to go in 2012. They just tried to address every possible potential for gaming. And anyway, so don't hold me to this, but I would say 2021, 22. it'll be the next
Few
opportunity
years.
to apply. I mean, a lot of the prerequisites for the next round have already been satisfied. There were lots of reviews that had to happen, but I would say probably, yeah. I mean, the last time I ever heard an official estimate from ICANN, they said 2020. So it's always just add 2 years onto whatever ICANN says.
Okay, thank you. Any one last question? Yeah, we have a question here. Becky? We're bringing you a mic. Thank you.
Since the launch of the latest new TLD sales and likes, has it 5 years since, has it disrupted the domain world as much as it had? Has it excited them? What's your thoughts 5 years later? And also on the tag of that, it's quite interesting to see that VeriSign are doing quite a big advertising campaign for their .com, and I haven't seen VeriSign do that sort of thing for a very long time. Is that a sign of them
That's news to me.
worrying
Actually.
about
Did you
it?
see that?
Yeah, it's on tube cards, and I think they're doing digital as well.
I
and
don't
various other
commute,
things.
so.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
No, I mean, VeriSign, new GTLDs don't seem to have hit .com much at all. They've certainly hit .net. .net peaked at about just over 15 million domains a few years ago, and it's gone down to 14 million, and I think it's kind of been pretty flat for the last year, 2 years. And I can't think of any reason that would be other than new GTLDs. I think lots of, you guys might know better than me, I think lots of people who defensively registered, they had their .com domain and then they registered their .org and .net defensively because those were the other available options. And then suddenly there were 700 additional options. People thought, well, I'm not going to register my brand .bike because I don't sell bikes. Why am I registering the .net defensively? So I think a lot of them dropped because of that reason. But yeah, I mean, new GTLDs are very broad. There are hundreds commercially available. Some of them are doing like 3,000, we've got 3,000 names in them. Some of them got millions, but it's all spam. The good ones are kind of in the middle-ish where there's a decent volume, but not a lot of abuse and people actually developing stuff. I discovered just yesterday there's a mobile phone company in Singapore that's running on a .life domain, and I had to check, is that .life really a GTLD? But yeah, there are lots of cases of people using these domains, but they're not that prominent. I think people who expected them to be successful in the 5 years were dead wrong. But they do exist. They are being used, and my nephew, who's 10, will probably not grow up with the same mindset as me. That anything, a domain name is either .com or a CCTLD, because he'll be exposed to many more of them. But by the time he's my age, domain names probably won't exist anyway. I'll be out of a job. I'm thinking about changing my name to Blockchain Insight. What do you think?
Yeah, blockchain.insight. I think that's it. Great. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin. Sorry we kept you away from writing your scoop. And